In this video, we will explore how the adaptations of species are related to their habitats. We'll also see how specific conditions lead to the formation of different types of ecosystems. First, we must define a habitat. The habitat is the place in which a community, species, population, or organism lives. It can include both geographical and physical locations or the type of ecosystem. For example, the habitat of a jaguar includes the tropical regions of Central and South America. More specifically, jaguars are found living in dense forest ecosystems where the wide variety of plants provide cover and the prey is abundant. Clownfish may live in the Pacific Ocean, but the physical habitat is often in a coral reef where it shares a mutualistic relationship living among sea anemones. Understanding habitats provides the foundation for understanding adaptations because the environmental conditions of a habitat shape the characteristics that allow organisms to survive and reproduce. For survival, it is important that organisms are adapted to the environment of their habitat. Many adaptations help organisms survive and thrive within different abiotic conditions of the habitat. Abiotic conditions, also referred to as abiotic factors, are the non-living physical aspects of the environment. Abiotic factors include things such as salinity, the type of soil, and air temperature, to name a few. In contrast, biotic factors are the living aspects of the environment, the organisms that shape or influence the ecosystem. Biotic factors are all the living organisms in the environment, such as the fungi, plants, animals, bacteria, etc. An adaptation is an inherited characteristic that increases an organism's chances of survival and reproduction in a particular environment. If you haven't already, you'll learn more about the mechanisms that drive these adaptations in B4.1 natural selection. Conditions such as temperature, water availability, salinity, and wind can all influence how organisms adapt. For example, marram grass is a species commonly found on the coastal sand dunes. Sand dunes tend to be dry, windy environments where water is easily lost. Marram grass has rolled leaves that reduce water loss. They also have sunken stomata, pores through which plants can exchange gases but also lose water. The sunken stomata are hidden inside the curled leaves and are below the surface to slow down evaporation. The leaf also has tiny hairs that trap moisture and help create a humid microclimate. They also have a large root system that helps anchor it in shifting sands. All of these are important adaptations that are needed to survive in that ecosystem. Mangrove trees provide another key example of how organisms are adapted to their habitats. Mangrove trees grow in salty, waterlogged coastal wetlands. In order to survive in these conditions, mangrove trees have aerial roots called pneumatophores, which project above mud to obtain oxygen. They also have stilt roots, which spread cable roots to provide stability in shifting, unstable soil and provide protection against waves and storm surges. In addition, they are able to extract fresh water from salt water using an advanced root system, and they have specialized glands on their leaves that actively secrete excess salt. These are just a few of the adaptations of mangrove trees. With the adaptations that organisms have, it allows them to live within a specific range of certain abiotic factors. The same abiotic factors that drive adaptation are the ones that affect the distribution of species. For plants, important abiotic factors include light intensity, temperature, water availability, soil pH, and mineral nutrients. The plant known as Edelweiss, or Leotopodium nivale, is adapted to low oxygen, fluctuating temperatures, high solar radiation, and dry, well-drained soil. It is typically found in alpine or subalpine zones in the European Alps. In contrast, plants like Colocasia esculenta, commonly known as elephant ear plant, are adapted to receiving abundant, bright, indirect light, consistently moist or boggy soil, high humidity, and sustained warmth. These plants are typically found in the understory of rainforest in Southeast Asia and India. These ranges of abiotic factors seen in the European Alps and the rainforest of Southeast Asia showcase how different adaptations can allow different organisms to thrive in each location. In animals, an example to help illustrate this idea is trout and the temperature of water they prefer. Trout prefer water at temperatures between 7 and 14 degrees Celsius. In this range, dissolved oxygen levels are typically optimal, allowing trout to actively feed, grow efficiently, and maintain healthy metabolisms. Anything outside of this range would not be suitable for trout. The range of abiotic factors that an organism can withstand or tolerate is referred to as the range of tolerance. This range of tolerance therefore dictates where organisms can live. We can see this illustrated in the graph here. This graph illustrates the range of tolerance for temperature that a fish has, like the trout we discussed previously. The fish can survive within this entire range of temperatures. However, at the optimum range, between here and here, we see the highest population of fish. This represents the ideal temperatures for the fish in which they can grow and reproduce most successfully. As we move outside this optimum range into the zone of physiological stress, the population size decreases and very few, if any, fish can survive. If we move outside the lower and upper limits of tolerance, no fish can survive these temperatures. The environmental factor that limits or restricts the survival or growth of the organism is known as a limiting factor. Ecologists often investigate limiting factors using transects. The transect is used to see how species distribution changes along some type of environmental gradient, like distance from water, light intensity, soil moisture, or soil pH. Along a transect, scientists can measure both species abundance and the abiotic variables. By comparing the measurements of the abiotic factor and the species abundance, they can determine whether a particular abiotic factor influences species distribution. Here's how to set up a transect. There are two types of transects that can be used, a line transect or a belt transect. When using a line transect, a habitat with a clear change in abiotic conditions should be selected. For example, you might study how plants change as you move away from a river into a forest. First, place a measuring tape in a straight line across the habitat. The tape is the transect line. It should run through the environmental gradient you want to investigate. Then, decide how you will record organisms. You might record every organism touching the line, or record the organisms found at fixed intervals along the transect, such as every 1 meter. At each interval, identify and record the species present. You should also measure the abiotic variables at the same point. Finally, repeat the transect in several nearby locations to have multiple trials of data and improve its reliability. A belt transect is very similar, but includes the use of quadrats as well. This method allows for more detailed data to be collected about species abundance across a long transect of habitat. Again, choose a suitable habitat that has an environmental gradient that can be studied. Start by laying a measuring tape in a straight line across the habitat, then place a quadrat at the first sampling point along the tape. A quadrat is a sampling tool that is typically a square or rectangular frame. It is used to isolate a standard defined area of habitat. Record the species found inside the quadrat. Depending on the investigation, this might include counting the number of individuals, the percentage cover, or recording the presence or absence of species. Then, move the quadrat along the transect at regular intervals, such as every 10 meters, and repeat measurements. At each quadrat location, the abiotic variables should be measured. Finally, be sure to repeat the belt transect several times in parallel lines to improve reliability and reduce the effect from random variation. Coral reefs are among the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth, but they can only develop under specific environmental conditions. Those conditions include the following. First, shallow coral reefs require warm water that is generally between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius. Second, they need shallow water so that light can penetrate to the reef surface. Third, the water must be clear. Too much sediment in the water can block the light needed for the photosynthetic algae living inside the tissue of corals. Corals also need a stable salinity and slightly alkaline pH levels between 8 to 8.3. These conditions all ensure that the symbiotic algae called zooxanthellae are able to photosynthesize efficiently and provide energy to the coral. If any of these conditions change significantly, the coral may stop growing and begin to die. This is seen with the phenomenon of coral bleaching, which is explored more in topic D4.3, climate change. As we've seen, abiotic factors play a crucial role in determining what kinds of living organisms are found in an environment. Throughout the Earth, there are large, distinct geographical regions defined by the regional climate, soil type, and predominant plant and animal life. These are referred to as biomes. Within these biomes, life has adapted to those specific environmental conditions. Temperature and precipitation are the two most important abiotic factors in determining the biome distribution. Different combinations of rainfall and temperature create different environmental conditions, which favor different types of vegetation. For example, high temperatures combined with abundant rainfall support tropical rainforests. Low rainfall and high temperatures produce hot deserts. Low temperature and limited precipitation support tundra ecosystems. Because climate largely determines the availability of water and energy, it strongly influences which biome develops in a region. It is important that you are familiar with the climate conditions, specifically annual temperatures and precipitation that characterize the following terrestrial biomes: tropical forest, temperate forest, taiga, grassland, tundra, and hot desert. A graph like this one is often used to visualize the differences in annual precipitation and average annual temperatures, and the types of biomes formed under these conditions. As we can see here, the graph is framed by the tundra, which has the lowest average annual temperatures and lowest annual precipitation, and the tropical rainforest, which has the highest average annual temperatures and highest annual precipitation. Rainfall above 100 centimeters is needed for a forest biome, and then varying temperatures change the type of forest from temperate to tropical. Grasslands tend to have less rainfall. Deserts, whether hot or cold, have very little rainfall. If the labels were covered, you should be able to identify each region in the graph. Here is the tropical forest. Here's the temperate forest, the grasslands. Here is a hot desert, taiga, and here the tundra. It's also worth noting that sometimes different terms are used to describe the same biome. For example, tropical grasslands are also referred to as the savanna, characterized by scattered trees and seasonal rainfall. The taiga is also known as the boreal forest. Climate does more than determine where biomes are found. Ecosystems found on opposite sides of the world often contain organisms with remarkably similar adaptations, even when those organisms are not closely related evolutionarily. As we learned on the previous slide, a biome is a large group of ecosystems that share similar climate conditions. Because organisms within a biome experience similar abiotic factors, they often evolve adaptations that help them survive those conditions. Interestingly, ecosystems within the same biome can be found on different continents, yet still share similar vegetation structures and ecological characteristics. This pattern is often the result of convergent evolution, where unrelated species independently evolve similar adaptations in response to similar environmental pressures. For example, cacti in North America and euphorbias in Africa both evolve thick, water-storing stems that help them survive in hot, dry environments. However, these two species of plants belong to very different evolutionary lineages. Their similar adaptations demonstrate how similar abiotic conditions can lead to similar evolutionary solutions. Another example can be seen in long-necked herbivores of grasslands found at temperatures greater than 15 degrees Celsius. Giraffes seen in Africa use their long necks to eat the acacia leaves high above the ground. The guanaco, close relative to the llama, has a similarly long neck to browse scrub vegetation in the open plains of South America. Lastly, we'll take a look at specific adaptations of organisms living in deserts and tropical rainforests. These two biomes represent two very different environmental extremes. In hot deserts, water is scarce. Organisms must conserve water and avoid overheating. Many plants are adapted to store large quantities of water in their stem, possess a thick, waxy cuticle to reduce evaporation, and have spines instead of leaves to minimize water loss due to transpiration. Many desert animals are nocturnal, becoming active at night when temperatures are cooler. They also have a variety of adaptations to stay cool and conserve water. In tropical rainforests, water is abundant, but competition for light is intense. Some trees develop large buttress roots that provide stability in shallow soils and grow rapidly upward to reach sunlight above the forest canopy. Other plants use additional accessory pigments to capture filtered light on the shaded forest floor. Many rainforest animals have adaptations for climbing, gliding, or moving efficiently through dense vegetation. In both environments, adaptations reflect the challenges organisms must overcome to survive. The fennec fox has large ears which help dissipate heat, and kidneys adapted to reduce water loss. Which biome would you find it in? You guessed it, the hot desert. The philodendron climbs on other plants to reach sunlight and has wide dark leaves designed to capture every trace of filtered light. Which biome would you find it in? Correct again, a tropical rainforest. What about the spider monkey? It is known for its long prehensile tail, used to grip branches and swing through trees, as well as teeth and digestive systems optimized to eat a diet of ripe fruits, nuts, and seeds. Where would you find the spider monkey? Of course, in the tropical rainforest. Finally, euphorbia have thick waxy stems and roots to conserve water. They have spikes instead of leaves, which further reduce water loss. Which biome would you find it in? A hot desert, that's correct. Be sure you have some of your own examples in mind of specific plant and animal species and their adaptations to living in hot deserts and tropical rainforests.